on, so.
Hi, Sandy Bowling. Can you tell us what organization I see that you're with Ashley Roundtree. Are you here representing an arts organization? We just want to make sure that all the folks that have an application, that they have access, that they've either seen this or that we send it to them.
Sandy is working with the Louisville Orchestra. Thank you, Sandy, for putting that in the chat.
Thanks. Okay, so it's 10:35. So in the interest of all of our busy schedules, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. Good to see you on a screen. We'll look forward to seeing you in person. Thank you for being here with us today. This is the applicant information session for the Sustaining Impact Grant at Fund for the Arts. We're talking about fiscal year 2023 or 2022, 2023, depending on how you organize your fiscal year at your organization. Can everybody see the screen okay? Everybody's good? Okay. All right, so this is our agenda for today. We'll do a quick introduction of our Fund for the Arts team, and then we will walk through the grant guidelines, which you can also find posted on the Fund for the Arts website. So you don't have to write it all down today. And we will also post a recording of this info session online. So you'll be able to access that again as well. And then we will also walk through the application itself and the online grant portal. So we're excited. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm Sarah Lindgren. I am the Director of Community Impact at Fund for the Arts, and I'm glad to be with you today. I'll pass it to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. Jordan Turpin. I'm the Impact Coordinator at Fund for the Arts. So I work closely with Sarah on the Community Impact team. And last but certainly not least, Janie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Janie Martin. I'm the CFO here at Fund for the Arts, and I'm here to walk through the financial workbook and answer any questions there. I'll make sure that you have a face with a name so that you can reach out to me.
Thanks, all. Let's see. Before we get started, I also just wanted to say once more, thank you to all of the grantees who met with us last fall. As you remember, Jordan and I kind of came around and did some listening sessions with all of the current SIG grantees and really just asked for your feedback, your experience with the grant application and the grant process. So your feedback was invaluable. And so once again, we say thank you. And we wanted to let you know that we listened to your feedback. So you will see that there are some slight changes in the application process this year. And you will see some minor changes as well in the grant year itself in terms of reporting requirements, et cetera. So nothing major in terms of change. So the process will be basically the same. The application content is basically the same with some simplifications that we'll walk through today. So that process, again, we gathered information last fall. We presented some recommendations to our board this spring, to our Community Impact Committee and to the board this spring. And those changes, those recommendations were approved. So just wanted to give that context before we started. Okay, so I'll walk through the grant guidelines, and then Jordan will go through the application and Janie will go through the financial workbook. So we'll all be talking with you today. Please use the mute function on your microphone while we're presenting so that everybody will have the best sound quality. And if you have a question, please put it in the chat and we'll make sure we get it throughout the session today. Okay, so let's start with the purpose of the Sustaining Impact Grant. The grant provides mission-based operating support to Greater Louisville nonprofit arts organizations in order to ensure the organization's ongoing capacity to drive community impact. COVID-19 and racial equity response. This will look familiar to you. This has been part of the grant process for a few years now, as we're all experiencing a continuation of COVID-19 and COVID-19 impacts on our programs. So we recognize that as arts organizations, you continue to operate under uncertainties with many unknowns and variables because of COVID-19. And we also acknowledge the community's call for racial equity, and we are committed to building a more inclusive and equitable community for all. And we join you in that process because we know that you are all working on that as well. In this year's grant application, the scoring includes your organization's plans for continued resilience and recovery with COVID-19. And it includes questions about your commitment to building a thriving and inclusive community. Our funding priorities. Okay, so for the upcoming grant year, Fund for the Arts will invest in organizations that are essential to Greater Louisville, organizations that are building a thriving community through the arts. We will invest in organizations that are equitable and inclusive, intentionally serving and telling the stories of diverse and traditionally underrepresented populations.
Somebody couldn't get it on.
We will invest in organizations that have strong plans for maintaining and sustaining their operations through the coming fiscal year and beyond. And we will also be investing in organizations that are looking for and open to opportunities for new collaborations. Funding levels. Okay, so this is consistent with previous years, so this should look familiar to you. We focus on three different funding levels. Level 1 is organizations that have an operating budget of $300,000 or under $300,000, and that is averaged over the previous 3 fiscal years. Level 2 is organizations with operating budgets between $300,000 and $1 million, again, averaged over the previous 3 fiscal years. And level 3, organizations with an operating budget of $1 million or above, averaged over the previous 3 fiscal years. If you're not sure what funding level you need to be in, if you have questions, if you've changed funding levels since last year, please feel free to reach out to us. And we've put our best contact information, grants@fundforthearts.org. Okay, so application components. We have 3 parts in the application this year, and these will be familiar to you from previous years. The first component, essential. This is worth 40% of your score. And again, an organization that is essential to and building a thriving community in Greater Louisville through the arts. Equity, diversity, and inclusion is the second component of the application. This is worth 30% of your score. And again, looking for an organization that is equitable and inclusive, serving and telling the stories of diverse and historically underrepresented populations. The third component, organizational capacity and sustainability. This is worth 30% of your score. An organization that demonstrates strong plans to maintain sustainable operations in the coming fiscal year. And also organizations that look for or are open to new collaborations. Our timeline. This is also available on our webpage. You don't have to write all this down. This is our timeline for the coming year. We opened the application on April 15th. April 20, today is the info session, so you made it here. Glad to see you. We're going to do virtual office hours this year. So instead of doing multiple info sessions, we will do one info session. It will be recorded and put online for future reference. And then we will do 3 virtual office hours, May 4th, May 27, and June 3rd. And you can see the times for those listed on the web page, as well as the link to access it on Zoom. And that is, you know, we know the info session at the beginning is important. It gives you some basic information, but we know you run into questions as you work through the application. So we wanted to have those office hours throughout the application period. We also know that sometimes you have a burning question and you might not be able to reach us immediately over the phone or get an immediate answer via email. But those office hours are times that you can pop in anytime, in that they're open for an hour and a half each. You can pop in anytime. You don't have to RSVP. You just show up in the Zoom, and we will be happy to talk with you and answer your questions, and you'll get an immediate response. Okay, June 10th is the application deadline. So by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be looking for your application to be completely submitted in the online portal. As with any grant application, we recommend that you don't wait till the final minute just in case you have a network issue or something goes wrong with the website. We encourage you to work on that before the last minute of the deadline. And if you do run into any technical issues with the online portal, please let us know. Okay, so after the applications are submitted, you can expect as an applicant to have an interview with the grant review panel. Please hold August 3rd through the 5th for those interviews. And by July 1, we will let each applicant know their specific date and time for the interview. But please hold those dates as tentative until July 1 when we give you more specific information. And then finally, by August 31, we will send your grant award notification via email. Okay, so let's walk through our process a little bit. Actually, before I start that, Jordan, do we have any questions in the chat? Okay, cool. All right, we'll keep rolling. Let's walk through what the process looks like. Okay, so, all right, so you've turned in your application, right? You've submitted it on the online portal by the deadline, and now it's time for us to do our work. So Fund for the Arts staff is going to review your application for completion, right? And if we do not, staff members do not score the applications or provide any kind of evaluation. We just look to see if it's submitted and if it's complete. And then the second thing that happens is that we have a financial review panel. And that panel is going to look specifically at the components of the application that you've submitted for organizational capacity and sustainability. That includes your financial workbook. Okay, so they're going to review that section specifically. And that panel is local individuals that have nonprofit or financial expertise. They review all of those components and score that part of the application. That panel may include Fund for the Arts board members as well. Okay, so the second part, there's a grant review panel that reviews the essential and community impact part of your application, as well as the equity, diversity, and inclusion components of the application. And if you're a returning applicant, you remember that includes a matrix, an equity, diversity, and inclusion matrix that you upload into your application. So the grant review panel will review all of those sections of the application. That includes members of our community impact committee. That's a committee made up of Fund for the Arts board members. It also includes at least 2, often 3 external reviewers. And those folks are from peer cities, usually outside of Greater Louisville. And they bring nonprofit expertise. They bring perspective from a variety of arts disciplines and are part of our review process. And so the committee and the external reviewers will review your application, they will provide a score, and then they will participate in the interview with you. So during the interview, what can you expect? You can expect that the panel members may have questions after reviewing your application. They may have a clarification, or they want to hear a little more about something that you've talked about in your application. So they will ask you questions. We don't know what those questions are because it's really developed by the reviewers as they go through your application. And after they've had the interview with you, they have the option to update their score of your application based on the interview content. And then finally, when they're completed with their process, they submit their scores and their comments to our Community Impact Committee. So the committee then reviews all of that information. They make a recommendation about grant awards to our board of directors. The board of directors makes the final approval of the grant award recommendations. And you'll see on the screen here, we've said the scoring is significant. However, please remember that the grant awards are entirely dependent on the pool of available funds for that year for the Sustainable Impact Grant. As you know, that amount can vary from year to year. And so in a few minutes, we'll get more specific into that, but they'll be making the decisions based on the scoring and also based on the available funding. And then just a reminder that the staff does not participate in the scoring process. We're here to just kind of manage and help everybody get through and walk through and administer the whole process. We do invite the financial review panel and the grant review panel members. They are screened for conflicts of interest. And they also, we anticipate that they will undergo a training prior to the grant process. So they are very familiar with the process as they go through it. Okay, so you see on your screen the application scoring. Okay, so this is what the reviewers will receive that guides them. I'll show you that on a couple of screens. Okay, so you can see that how many points you get on your application. Your application has a total value of 100 points. So how many points you get on the application is associated with a rating. This is how the rating is defined. For example, 80 to 89 points out of 100 points has a strong rating. The applicant has provided strong evidence throughout the application, demonstrating the organization has the capacity and programming to drive impact. Okay, and then this score leads to a recommendation for the grant award. Okay, so again, with the levels, we touched on this earlier, but the level that you're applying at has implication on the maximum grant award that you can receive. So if you're a level 1, you can receive up to 20% of your organization's operating revenue for a year. The maximum is $60,000. Okay. You'll see this is new this year. Level 1, this is only true for level 1. Level 1 applicants are eligible to receive a 2-year grant. The committee will consider the option of a 2-year grant. For level 1 organizations, this is entirely dependent on the committee's recommendation and on the funding available for this year. So it's not a given, but it's new this year that they will consider a 2-year allocation. For level 2 organizations may also receive up to 20% of their operating revenue. Their max is $200,000. Eligible for a 1-year grant, again, depending on the funding available. And finally, level 3 is eligible for up to 15% of the operating revenue. with a maximum award of $900,000. And again, eligible for a 1-year grant dependent on the funding available.
I just want to add, Sarah, that there is no additional application step for those, for the two-year potential for level 1. So you just complete the application as normal. There's no additional like step in that process whatsoever. And then if funding is available and it is the board's recommendation, it'll be more of an automatic type process. There'll be some follow-up around that.
Correct. Thank you, Jordan. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to touch on is how is the grant award decided? So on the screen, you can see this is a calculation or a formula that is used by our committee to determine the grant awards. In the past, if you're a returning applicant, in the past, when you receive the notification of your grant award and your reviewer comments, you will have seen this formula on that document that you receive. So this should be familiar to you, but we will walk through it again. So let's look at the first line, okay, where it says 3-year operating revenue average. So the first step in the calculation, A times B equals C. We've all gone back to high school algebra. So you can plug in this calculation for your own organization to try to understand how your grant award may be decided, okay? So you take your 3-year average of your operating revenue, and then you look at the max percentage, which is what we were just showing here, okay? So if you're a level 1, that's 20%. And then that gives you the answer. Yeah, okay, sorry, I skipped over the cap. Look at the cap, and then that gives you the answer to C. So your 3-year average, percentage, look at the cap, then you come up with the answer for C. Okay, so Jordan's done an awesome example here. So if your 3-year operating average is $350,000, this is just an example, and your max percentage is 20%, the cap is 200,000, the answer we get is 70,000. Okay, so we've not exceeded the cap. Okay, that's the first step. Then we're going to take C times D equals E. Okay, so this is where your score comes in. So we figured out C based on our revenue and our level. And then we look at D, the application score. Okay, so we've come up with just an example. Let's say you've received an 88%. Remember, we had the screen a few minutes ago. 88 out of 100 points would give you an 88%. So let's just say, for example, your answer to C is 70,000 and you've received an 88%. Then you get the answer to E, 61,600. Okay, so your max amount in the formula score gives you a new number. Okay. Okay, so then the more complicated, unpredictable part is it depends on how much money is in the pool for sustaining impact grants. And we know that varies from year to year. So for example, last year in fiscal year 22, this was how the committee decided how to award the grants. Okay, so they looked at the percentage of increase from the prior year. Okay, so you could increase from the prior year unless that was over 100%. Plus they rounded the award to the nearest 100,000. So in this example, that number did not change. Okay, but your number could change depending on the funding pool available and the parameters that the committee applies in that year. Okay, so also keep in mind on an annual basis, once the recommendations are figured, if the pool available cannot meet those recommendations, the recommendation is that every grant award is decreased by the same amount across the board. Okay. And again, our board of directors makes final approval of all the grant awards. Okay, so a couple requirements to keep in mind. In order to go through the application and be considered for funding for the Sustaining Impact Grant, your organization needs to fill all the requirements throughout the grant period, okay, and be representing accurately everything that you've submitted to the Fund for the Arts. As a reminder for returning applicants, go back and review the eligibility requirements. Those are in the grant guidelines, and just double check that you're still meeting all of those requirements, okay? Because even though you're eligible as a recipient from last year, you still need to meet all of those eligibility requirements, okay? Including that your grant reporting is all up to date, okay? So if you don't know if your grant reporting is up to date, please check in with us. We'll be happy to help you. And again, we said this before, but again, funding is contingent on what we have available in the pool each year. Okay, so resources, here's some things to help you. This is the address for the web page. If you don't have the exact link, you can just go to the Fund for the Arts web page. Apply for funding as an option at the top of the page. You want to select organizations, and that will pull up any grants available to you at this time, including the Sustaining Impact Grant. I'll also note that we have 2 other grants that are open right now, Arts Reach grant and a capital grant. So you might want to check those out as well. They're all on different timelines, so be sure you check out each page. Okay, so back to the Sustaining Impact Grant page. You will find their grant guidelines, which is a document that will include a lot of the information that we walk through today. It also includes the entire criteria and scoring rubric that the reviewers use. So we strongly recommend that you pull up that guidelines document and read it through and refer to it throughout your application process if you have questions. It also includes a grant glossary. So you'll notice when you go through the application and through the guidelines that there are words that are in blue, and those words are included in the glossary. So if you want to double check that, that is available to you as well. And then in the application, the financial workbook and the DEI Matrix are templates that you can download from the application and complete. Okay, so questions. If you need to ask questions, please contact us at grants@fundforthearts.org. I've put on the screen the office hours that we talked about before. Please join us for the office hours. You can pop in anytime. The link is on our webpage. It's also in the guidelines. You don't have to RSVP. You don't have to reserve a certain time. You can just pop in. If we have more people coming in at once, we'll just we'll get to everybody as best we can. They're each an hour and a half long. You can come in and ask your questions. Okay, so let me pause there. I will stop sharing my screen. Okay, let me pause for a moment and just see if we have any questions so far before we go to the next part of the info session. Any questions in the chat, Jordan? Okay.
Nope, none in the chat.
All right. So that was a lot. Is everybody still with us? Still good? Okay, good. All right. So Jordan, I'm going to pass it to you to walk through the application. And then when we get to the financial workbook part of the application, Janie will walk through that with us.
Great. All right. So can everyone see the Sustaining Impact Grant webpage? Awesome. So the link that was in a few slides ago takes you to this webpage. It's the Sustaining Impact Grant webpage. And there's all kinds of information that we already went over in that presentation, as well as our timeline. So this is where you can find the office hours. Well, that's the applicant info session, so you don't need that now, but you do need the office hours link. You can find that in the timeline. Again, as well as those dates to hold. As Sarah mentioned, we will email the schedule and a little bit more information to prepare you for that interview by July 1. And then the different links that Sarah mentioned as well, the grant guidelines, the grant glossary, and then your applications. Everyone on this call has submitted, or at least all the organizations have submitted an application with Fund for the Arts before, so you will be familiar with the 2-button system. We have one started online application. You want to click this button if you are just starting your application for the very first time. Continue working on a saved application is what you want to click on if you have started an application or just opened one. Sometimes the application, you just open it and it'll go to your saved files in your grant portal. So you don't even have to put in any information. It just tucks it away there. So when you come back, if you know you've opened it, you want to click on that continue working on a saved application. I'm going to click on start on a new application. You'll log into your grant account that you use. If you are a returning organization, you want to use whatever account your organization uses. It is tied, as you can see, I just typed in my email address. It is attached to an email address, not an organization. If you don't know, if you're returning, because returning applicants did not need to complete the pre-application stage. So if you're a returning SIG applicant and you're not sure who the account is tied to, just contact grants@fundforthearts.org and we'll get you straightened out. If we need to do any transferring of account information, we can do that as well. I know there's been a lot of transition. If you are a new applicant, you will want to use the same email that you submitted your pre-application with. If you have any questions or issues with any of that, though, just reach out to us at grants@fundforthearts.org and we'll get you straightened out. So once you log in, you're in the application. So the introduction page goes over all that same information that we've been over today, as well as on the web page. 2 navigational things as you're working through this application, you can either click next at the bottom or you can go back up top using the tabs. Either one is fine. One little thing though, do not click save and finish later unless you truly want to be done with the application in this moment, because it will save your work and log you out. So you do not need to click save until I think it does automatically time out. So you might want to do that every maybe 20 or 30 minutes. But otherwise you don't have to click that. All right, so first page, basic organization information. As you're working through this, if you have any, there are words in blue, and you can click on the hyperlinked available here to go to the Sustaining Impact Grant Glossary where we've defined those words. Organization information, you want your organization's legal name, your doing business as name, normal staff address, city, state, zip code, the county you're located in, the Louisville Metro Council district you're located in, and if you don't know your Louisville Metro Council district, I know that they just redistricted, you can always click the hyperlink here to look up your district and then put it in this field. If you are located in Indiana, you just click not applicable. Phone number, we want your mission statement. This is so in the past I think we had 3 separate applications, one for level 1, one for level 2, one for level 3. This year it's all the same application. So that in the past on that webpage, there would have been separate buttons, one for each level. This year it's just the one for the new application and the one for the access your saved application. So because of that, we still need to keep track of the levels. So in this box, you'll select if your organization is level 1, 2, or 3. Again, using that information that Sarah shared about what qualifies you as a 1, 2, or 3. We ask what is your organization's primary artistic area, using the National Endowment for the Arts artistic areas. So you'll select the one that best fits your organization from this list. We do ask for your website. That is a requirement, but then everything else, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, any other social media you want to share with us, it's completely optional. You don't need to go create new social media just for this application. If you have it, we'd love to see it. It's not counted against you if you don't have all of those things. We ask for your executive director information. I know this might seem silly that we're asking for an executive director information and then we ask for their title. That's because, like in our case, our executive director isn't executive director. Andre is our president and CEO. So that's what we're getting at with that, is if your ED type person is not called the executive director. We want their email address, their office number, and office extension if applicable. Give me one moment. Okay. Then we ask for the application primary contact. This should be the person that's filling out the application. However, we understand there are some situations where you might have one person completing the application that doesn't need to be the primary contact. This needs to be the best person we can reach out to with questions for this application. This is also the information we'll use moving forward unless told otherwise. There will be a couple different, throughout the process, there's a couple opportunities to update contact information, but we do rely heavily on this information. So please make sure that this name, title, email, all of that is accurate for your primary contact. Okay, and then we dive into the actual substance of the sustaining impact grant. So we have the first category, essential, which is worth 40% total of the application score. And Sarah, please jump in at any point that you would like. This is kind of where we jump into some questions that have been combined and slightly tweaked from previous years. So we dive into the first question, asking how your organization is essential. Again, that's blue, so you can look up how we define essential in the glossary. 2, in building a thriving community in Greater Louisville. We ask that your response includes both qualitative and quantitative evidence of your organization's community impact. Some examples include your number of locations programming occurs in, zip codes, neighborhoods, participants served, academic achievement, 21st century skill development, etc. There's a whole list of examples there for you. And you are welcome to frame your response in a kind of based on a typical pre-COVID-19 year.
And Jordan, I'll just add there, returning applicants, you may notice that a couple of these questions we've increased the word limit. So we've given you a little bit more space for your response. Again, that was in response to feedback that we heard from grantees. So we have increased that space for you. Again, that doesn't mean that you have to fill every word of the space if you don't need it. But think about in the past, if you've gotten questions during your interview or comments that said something like, I wish I knew more about this, or I wish I could have heard more about something in your offerings or about your organization. If you've heard those kind of comments or questions in the past, you might want to consider really using this additional space that we've provided for some of the questions.
And with that, we also attached this upload field for examples. So if you would rather tell us how you do that via video or help supplement that information with videos, photos, however you would like to tell your story in a way beyond this text box field, we've provided that in this upload field. Something to note about the upload fields, it is a 2-step process. So you want to first click choose file. You want to first assume that you want to save your work to your computer. Please save it as a PDF. If you have multiple examples, combine those into one PDF. If you don't have a way to do that, please reach out to grants@funforthearts.org and we can help compile that for you and produce one PDF that you can upload. So you've saved your work, it's on your computer. You're going to click choose file. You're going to open that file. You see that the file name is now visible. That does not mean that the file has uploaded. And if you get a little bit happy with clicking, it'll go away. So then you click upload. So step 1, choose your file, make sure the name is visible there. And step 2 is click upload. Now that the orange toolbar is there, you see your file is successfully uploaded and you may move on. I just wanted to point that out because we get a lot of folks saying, well, I uploaded it, but if you don't hit that second step, it doesn't truly attach to your application. Question 2, describe how COVID-19 has impacted your organization's offerings and ability to drive community impact. So this response can include any innovations, adaptations, or new outcomes you were able to achieve in the last 12 months. This is another one where we've kind of combined some questions and we've upped the word count just slightly to reflect that. Question 3, so question 2 is about how, what was in the past? How did you adapt, innovate, overcome? And then question 3 is what's the future? So describe your organization's plans for the next 12 months. So your offerings, driving outcomes, how are you rebuilding, any contingency plans, et cetera. So again, I know quickly looking over these two seem very similar, but we're looking, question 2 is in the past. Question 3 is what are your plans moving forward? The second section, equity, diversity, and inclusion, is worth 30% of your application score. Question 4, describe how your organization is equitable, diverse, and inclusive. We want to see in responses description of participants, staff, and board, how you intentionally serve and tell the stories of diverse and historically underserved and underrepresented populations. You may frame your response based on a typical pre-COVID year as well here, and also as prior to the recent racial equity movement. With question 4, we also have the DEI Matrix. I'm going to show this. Returning applicants, it is very, no major changes here as in past years. So to accomplish this field, you do want to click here to download template, and you might have noticed it, that quick little icon where it downloaded to my computer. It'll go wherever your downloads go on your computer. So I'm going to pop this up here.
Jordan?
Yeah.
Before we dive into that document, there was a question about error messages when uploading. Could they be related to using a Mac? Sometimes getting the error message and then other times not getting the error message. Do you have any advice there?
It could be a sizing thing, depending on the size of the file, maybe. Could be a Mac thing, but the best way to troubleshoot is to reach out to us at grants@fundforthearts.org, because we can try to upload it. We can either upload it from the back end and totally alleviate you from that situation. We can find a workaround, or we can help condense or put that information together in a way that will make the application happy.
Thanks, Jordan.
Sometimes there's no telling. Sometimes there's a variety of things it could be. But that back to, as Sarah mentioned, the first step after applications come in, our staff spends a lot of time not changing information, but going through the application to mostly make sure that all of the attachments are uploaded and openable for the reviewers. So we just make sure, some of you last year, you might remember me reaching out and say, hey, this isn't a file that our reviewers can't open. Can we, get a new one, or I can help with that. That's what we're doing. So we're not going to go through, we don't change like grammar or anything like that, but we make sure that all the boxes are checked and all the uploads are attached in a way that our viewers can see what you've submitted. Okay, so the DDI Matrix. I will go through it, even though there haven't been some major changes. I do know we have some new folks on the call, new organizations, as well as just new to the organization submitting this application for the first time. So you'll want to, again, download this template, and then as you're working, you'll want to fill in your work, save it, and save it to your computer. So you'll type in all of your, do a quick example. Please make sure you put your organization name on there. These blue columns, I'm going to go like kind of section by section. So this first columns B through E, everything that's in blue, we're asking about your staff. Anyone that is on your team, full-time, part-time, contract, administrative, paid staff. That's who these columns are about. So we ask for the racial and ethnic background of your current staff members. I'm just going to put in some random numbers so that way you can see as we go along. Maybe this doesn't make sense, but I want you to see that these fields will auto-populate. So that first column B is number of current staff members. So that's your total staff, everyone on your staff, the breakdown of those folks. You will need to do a little bit of calculating there. So once you put your total in there, you notice the percentages filled in. So then the next column, so you don't really have to touch C, but if you do notice that something's not populating correctly, please reach out to us. Column D is specifically about your leadership. So column B was everybody. Column D is just your leadership team. So I'm just, again, for the sake of example, You will have to total it out, and then the percentages will populate for you. There is, I'm skipping over it because I just typed in random numbers up here, so I didn't keep up with my BIPOC totals as I was working through it, but you will want to fill in your BIPOC totals as well, going through the list that you filled in up here, so totaling those out as well. So that's all about racial and ethnic background as it relates to your paid staff. Then we have the age breakdown of your paid staff. So early childhood, you might have some paid child actors on your staff. So you would just enter however many folks fit into each of these categories as well. Again, for sake of example, I'm just going to type in some random numbers, although that might make this cranky because it's not going to match. Okay, it's not affecting it. And then again, column D is your leadership. So breaking out from that, your leadership team. The next column, I'm not going to fill in numbers from here on because I think you get the gist of fill in from your whole staff and then fill in for just your leadership, and then the percentages you don't have to worry about, they will total for you. So then we do the same thing for gender identity, fill in how many of your total staff identified male, female, non-binary, or gender non-conforming, and then prefer not to disclose. Then you pop over to column D and fill out the same thing for your leadership team. Geographic residence, local versus non-local, same thing, column D, who's local and who's not local from your leadership team. And then lastly, we have individuals with disabilities, members of LGBTQ plus community, and immigrant or refugee. I'm going to pause for a second because I saw some activity in the chat. Unless Sarah, you look like you got it under control. Do you want to address anything verbally?
Let's see, the question that just came in, Alyssa, if we have had staff changes within the fiscal year, should we include past staff's info? I think we're looking for a current picture. If we needed to compare to last year, we would have your data from last year, but I think we're looking for current, present information about your staff. And I think I got the rest of them. Dave, I tried to answer your question. I hope I've got it, but the reason that, how to fill it in. Okay, thank you. The reason that we do not total that for you is we kind of leave it up to your organization to, indicate how your staff identify, right? So the acronym BIPOC, of course, stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Okay, but we realize that because there are some lines in here that are other or two or more ethnic origins or race, it's not easy for us to just auto total that for you. So you're going to have to account for how your staff identify. So we wanted to leave that flexible for you. You'll need to give us that total. So like the line that just says total, you can just do an auto sum of everything that you've listed above. But we want you to self-identify or self-report how many of your staff would identify as BIPOC. I hope that helps answer your question. So you're just going to fill in a number there. Okay, cool.
Okay, so I'm going to go on over to the board. So you're going to do the same thing for your board. Same exact categories for all of your board members. So we're looking for the total board, including your leadership, and then your percentage, or I'm sorry, your number of current board leadership. So breaking it out total versus who board president, vice president, et cetera, who's the leadership of your board team. Again, these will auto populate the percentages. You just need to fill in the columns that are blank. Same thing, we assume that you don't have board members that are early childhood or youth, but we'd love to hear that feedback if you do. So we have left it open for your young professional, adult, and older adult board members, all the same categories. gender identity, geographic residence, and specific community identification. Then participants. So the participant section, these are folks who interact with your organization. And I say it that way because not everyone has tickets and has patrons as participants. So you might, it's whoever's coming to your shows, taking your classes, whoever's interacting with your organization in the way your organization does what it does. We know that this field is especially hard to track. And we're also, we put a little note over here that we're asking you to estimate your participant information to the best of your ability. So we can base that off of your last completed fiscal year, all the same categories, and there's just one column for participants. Sarah, Janie, did you want to add anything else to this before I move on, or are there any other questions about this before we move on? All right, so I'm going to save this. You can save it just as is, as the Excel sheet, or you can save it as a PDF. Either one is fine with us. We can work with both. Once you've saved that, you're going to choose your file. Same thing as before, make sure you click upload. Although hopefully yours is completed, unlike mine. Upload that file, and then question 4 is done. So question 5, we want to know how COVID-19 and the racial equity movement has impacted how you serve and engage diverse and historically underserved and underrepresented populations. This response can include how your organization internally did that through training or creation and implementation of policies and procedures, as well as externally, such as community participation, marketing and communications, etc. We do ask, so this I think is new. So we ask that returning applicants must demonstrate progress from the last sustaining impact grant submission. New applicants must provide details on your involvement in the community initiatives, as well as any professional development completed by staff and board members. So this section, it's really important to hear. Well, never mind. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add a little tip. Returning applicants demonstrating progress. So again, suggestion to look back into your materials from the previous year, any questions that you received during the interview, any comments that you received in that award package from the comments from the reviewers. If they made any kind of suggestion or raised any specific questions about this component of your application, you might want to revisit that in terms of addressing how to demonstrate progress.
Perfect, thank you. So again, this is question 5, what has happened? What has your organization done or been doing? And then question 6, we ask what are the organization's plans moving forward? So again, kind of like that, we want to know in question 5, what's been done, and question 6, what are the next steps? What are your plans moving forward? So again, that is just 3 questions in the EDI section. And then the final section is organizational capacity and sustainability. Let's see what I want to go over before I pass it to Janie. Okay, so question 7. So this section, organizational capacity and sustainability, is also 30% of your score. Question 7, we're asking the strategic operational decisions that your organization has made in the last 12 months to remain solvent. Janie, I know you're going to go over the financial workbook, but would you want to take all 3 of these questions? Not to put you on the spot.
Sure. Okay, question 7. Describe the strategic operational decisions your organization has made in the last 12 months to remain solvent. Include as much detail as possible. When discussing reductions or increases, you're encouraged to use percentages to demonstrate change. If your organization has completed the Better Business Bureau standards for charity accountability, share how many of the 20 standards your organization currently meets. It's I think it's somewhat straightforward. So when you think about your organization over the last year, 2020 was everyone was learning year. 21 was we're living in an environment. We've had 22 was living in the COVID environment, racial movement environment, with hope for a more normal return of arts happenings. So just respond in how your organization has changed, how you've adapted. And then question 8, of course, is the workbook, which I'll go over in a second. And question 9, describe your organization's plan for sustainability for 2022, 2023. That's your budget. You'll in the financial workbook, you will put a budget. Here's your chance to speak to that. Explain increases, decreases, what your plans are. It's just it's an opportunity to explain the numbers, to give some excitement and or information to the review committee. Okay.
Thanks for letting me put you on the spot, Janie.
Okay.
Before we jump over to the financial workbook, I'm going to quickly, because after that, it's just these attachments. So I do want to talk about those attachments before we go to the financial workbook. So these attachments are your Form 990, your independent audit, whichever one your organization at the level you are at is required to submit. So for level 1 applicants, you'll want to attach your Form 990 or your Form 990 EZ. Level 2 and level 3, attach your independent audit. Again, these are prerequisites for being eligible for Sustaining Impact Grant. But if you have any questions, of course, reach out to us. So you'll attach those files here. We're also asking for level 1 applicants only that you attach your financial statements used to create, I don't want to upload just yet, used to create the Form 990 or 990 EZ for the last completed fiscal year. Janie, do you want to add anything about those 2 documents?
I do, thank you. If you are an organization that uploads a 990 or 990 EZ, or if you are a small arts organization that actually files the card, that you don't actually have a tax return, that's fine. You can share that with us, but we need the financials that support the 990. And the reason for that is that your financial workbook is based on unrestricted support. And your 990 will have restricted and unrestricted revenue. So to be able to reconcile the workbook, that's why we need those. Thank you.
Thanks, Janie. And then the last 2 attachments in the application are the staff list and the board list. So both of these are also templates. I'm going to just quickly show you. These are should be pretty easy to complete, I think. There it is. If you do not have Excel on your computer or these attachments, these templates give you any headache, please reach out to us and we'll figure out how to work through this together. So it's pretty simple. Please include your organization name up top, and then we just want a list of your staff, first name, last name, what their title is, their phone number, and their email address. Same thing for the board list. So this would be the same kind of thing. You download the template, you fill in your information, save your work, choose the file from your computer, click upload. Board list looks a lot like the staff list. Again, this should be completed to, if you're really on top of it and you're completing your application today, it is whatever your staff and board is today, April 20th. So just keep that in mind. If there's some transition happening, we will get some updated information from grant recipients once those have been awarded. So there is a little bit more information that we ask for in the board list. I hope this has been showing every time I pull a new document. You see my board list? Okay, great. So the board list, same thing. We want to know their name, their occupation, any affiliations within the community. Like, we ask for their occupation, but what other kind of boards are they on, committees do they serve on, et cetera. How many years they've been on your board, if they hold a board office position, any of their kind of committee assignments, if that's applicable, address, zip code, phone number, email address. Same thing, save your work and do the 2-step upload process. Before we dive into everyone's favorite part, the financial workbook, I'm going to pause for any questions. There is one in the chat. Should a staff list, oh, Sarah already got it. She's so fast. I'm going to read it out loud just in case anyone else has the same question. Should the staff list include contract teaching artists or just W-2 employees? And the answer is all of the above. Anyone that it works for your organization that you pay, whether that's W-2, whether that's contract, whatever it is, put them on that staff list sheet.
Yeah, and really that's if they're considered staff for your organization. I mean, if they're contracted artists that are part of your programming schedule, you don't have to list them as staff, but if you consider them staff members, then you should include them. Okay.
Another good question, if we are making a significant shift in staff leadership that will begin at the end of June 2022 in the DEI Matrix, should we report staff leadership details as they are at this time? At the time we apply for the grant, or report them as they will for the next 12 months? I would say as they are at the time of application is what I would do. And then if there is any opportunity within the DEI Matrix to note upcoming changes or in the application, if you can find any way in your application to mention your plans, there's a couple different questions regarding what are your plans moving forward. I think, I can't remember which number it was, but it was in the EDI section of like, what are your plans moving forward? That could be an opportunity to maybe touch on that. And then again, in the interview, you'll have a chance to mention those changes as well. Sarah, you look like you have a thought.
Yeah, I was just going to add, if those changes are all completely mapped out and you already know them, and you think that they are changes that, are significant considering the requirements of the grant, or something that you definitely want the panel to consider, I think, Jordan, can they attach 2 files in there, or should she just create maybe another tab in the DEI Excel file?
They could do 2 tabs. That's a good, I just discourage that just in case there's anything that might, if you feel very confident, as Sarah is saying, that that's going to be in motion, I think that's great. I just hesitated to say doing that in case there were any, changes from time of submission to the actual review. But I think they could definitely do a second tab or save the 2 files and compile into one PDF with some kind of explanation. We could definitely work with that.
And if you're, if you're not sure, we can, pop in for office hours. We'll talk about it further.
Janie, do you want me to share the screen, or are you set to share your screen?
I can share my screen.
Great. So we're traveling back to that, I believe it's question 8, the financial workbook. So Janie's going to take it from here to show what you need to do for that question.
Okay, here we are in the Excel workbook. Everyone can see my screen. I'm down here at the bottom of the tabs. There are, the first tab is the checklist, the financial reporting form, FFTA funding summary, reconciliation of operating revenue, variance analysis and some COVID related programs, and then your finance committee. Please start on the checklist tab. This gives you the materials that you need. You'll need, of course, this workbook. You need an audit. If you're level 2 or 3, you'll need your 990, the financial statements, those things that are all uploaded that Jordan just mentioned. Your projections for fiscal year 22. If you're like the Fund for the Arts, we're a June 30 year end. So when this application would be submitted, I would be projecting for June 2022, and then your fiscal year 23 budget. So for next year. And this is the opportunity in the grant, the question that I was saying, here's your opportunity to put, here's your numbers, and then the explanation helps walk through, explain to the committee what those plans are, makes the numbers, just add some verbiage to the numbers. You may have more than one scenario. If you'd like to present that, we're happy to the committees would be happy to look at that. And then of course, a list of your finance committee. Those are the materials that you'll need to finish this workbook. If you'll note, you enter data in blue cells. So this workbook has formulas and whatnot. So I tried to make it where it's visually not so overwhelming. And the order that you want to complete these is listed here. So first we want to go to the financial reporting form, which is this one. Enter your organization's name and your fiscal year. The second is to complete the FFTA funding summary, which is the second tab. This is if you received a sustaining impact grant last year, or you had some special strategic award. I don't believe we had any of these last year, but maybe we did. So this is your sustaining impact grant, the strategic award, there's a total there. And then here are other grants that you may have gotten from Fund for the Arts. If you had anything, if you had a rent subsidy or arts match or any of the educational dollars, or if you received partnership funding through FFT, that's a designated gift that would come to us from a donor, would donate to the Fund for the Arts designated for your organization, and it would be forwarded directly to you. So this is your second form to complete, and that will carry those totals, the necessary totals will carry here. What I want to point out is only the general operating support and the strategic grants. So it's line 12. Line 12 is what carries to here, because sometimes what we had found is that that the educational dollars were in other places. So people were having to pull that out. So that's what's happening there. The only piece that comes up is sustaining impact grant or strategic grants. So, okay, so we do the funding summary. Now we go to the financial reporting summary. So it's revenue. Notice that it is unrestricted revenue. There's also a couple lines if you had a PPP loan, if you had Save Our Stages. Here's an opportunity for you if you had something special and unique, you can put here. The expense side are typical three categories: program, service, fundraising, management in general. Out of these three totals, please pull out if you utilized employee retention credits. In the past, for anyone who got PPP, if those funds were forgiven, they were rolled into revenue. For employee retention credits, those were not revenue, but they reduced costs. So what might happen is that your expenses are going to would have a huge percentage decrease, but it's due to employee retention credit. So that's why we're separating that. So and the other piece that we're asking you to pull out is your non-cash expenses like depreciation, amortization, and in kind. And then we'll go down, we'll wreck some other odds and ends that some folks may have. So here's your unrestricted net assets. We asked for a current ratio, current assets and liabilities, and then some information about your organization, some metrics. Does anybody have any questions about this form? When you get into it and start putting it together, if you have any questions, please, you can reach out to me. After we complete the financial reporting form, we'll go to the reconciliation. So we're just going on down the tab line here. What happens is, because that form is unrestricted and your total revenue, like for example, if you have an audit or a 990, then this is tying to your unrestricted revenue. So you should not, this should check to zero. So we're helping you make sure that your workbook ties to the financial reports that you're submitting. After that, we go to a variance analysis. This form is going to feed. So it's looking at operating revenues, operating expenses, and then of course the net, a surplus or deficit. That's the difference in those two. If it's greater than plus or minus 5%, we ask you to give an explanation as to why. So this is for last year, 21 versus 22, which may be a projection. And then we ask you to look at what's happening right now and your budget. So another opportunity to explain, if something is changing in your budget more plus or minus 5%. There's some questions down here about endowment, and that's the change form. Then there's a tab here that's called COVID related programs. This gives us some data. It helps make sure that we're understanding the changes in your financials. It also helps with the advocacy work that we do on behalf of the art sector. So this information helps us make sure that we're understanding your financials, and also helps us when we're trying to get more funds into the economy here. And the last but not least, your finance committee, just their name, their occupation, the years they've been on your financial experience, and the years they've been involved with the organization. So does anyone have any questions? I know it looks fine when I'm sitting here. Miss Sarah, I saw you raise your hand. You're on mute. Okay, she's still on mute.
Yeah, I was stuck. There was a question in the chat, Jamie, about can we talk more about the financial statements that level 1 organizations need to upload into the application? This was the financial statements used to create your 990 or 990 Easy.
Yes. So if you're, let's say you're a June 30 year end, so your last completed fiscal year will be 6/30/2021. You had a set of financial statements that came from whoever produces your financial statements, a balance sheet and an income statement, or a statement of financial position and a statement of activities, depending on how they're labeled. Those financial statements that were given to the accountant to prepare the tax return, that's what you'd want to include.
Does that answer the question that was in the chat?
And I'm gonna, it's okay if I stop sharing?
Mm-hmm.
I will put my email in the chat. If you are working on your financial workbook and something isn't making sense, just email me.
Thanks, Janie.
I'm here to help. Happy to do it.
Okay, let's see. We've got a couple of questions coming in. Janie, I'm going to put this one to you. If we qualified for the ERC for 1 or more quarters in 2021, but have not yet received the funds for 1 or more of those at the time of application, should we report that funding or no?
Yes, you should report that funding.
Thank you. Okay, we have about 15 minutes left. If there are more questions, this is a great time to ask them. You have Janie here, who's the expert on the financial review section. Jordan, who is the expert on Blackbaud, which is our grant application portal. You have lots of expertise here, so it's a great time for any other questions. You can feel free to speak them out or put them in the chat, whichever you're comfortable with.
I know we've been over this, but I just like to remind folks at every chance that I get that because the staff here does not score the applications, we are really freed up to be able to help you in any way that you need. So like I know there's some organizations that Janie has really put a lot of time in with the financial workbook piece. So if that's something that your organization needs, please do reach out to us, and don't forget about those office hours. If you can't make it to one of those office hours, let us know. We can try to schedule something, but the best way to reach us, as we have so many grant opportunities open right now, is going to be one of those. I think there's 3 office hours. There's no set agenda for those. It's just come with whatever questions or needs you have.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions come in at the moment, but I will just say thank you for being here, and for those who participated in the interviews and listening sessions with us in the fall. We say thank you again for your feedback and your time, and just I know that this process is a lot of work, and it's a big application process for this operations grant, but we're here for you. So just feel free to reach out or come to those office hours. Okay, I see one more question. Are these grant questions and prompts available anywhere other than logging into the system? I would like to share them with key board members who will help. Jordan, can you?
I'll take this one. Yeah. So quick, let me share my screen real quick how you can do that. And I'll tell you the one caveat to this method. Okay, so when you're in the system, when you're in the application, you can click, there's a printer friendly version up here that you can click on. And it'll present this piece for you. The one downside to this version is anything that is a drop down. Seeing if I can find an example. Maybe an organization. Yeah, anything that's a drop down isn't going to show you what the offerings, what the options are. But largely speaking about the questions, you can click that printer friendly version, and then if you you can print to PDF. And save it to your computer. That is the best workaround that we have for that piece.
Thank you, Jordan. Okay, looks like that answered that question. Okay. Has a shorter version of this application been considered for level 1 applicants? Dave, this actually is a shortened version of the application. So if you want to talk further about that, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes after this, or to talk further about this. But I will say a lot of research has gone into this in terms of our peer funding organizations in other cities, and this is a fairly consistent process for an operations grant. And just a reminder that, you know, part of the reason that there's this level of questions into the financial and capacity parts of your organization is because it's an operations grant. It's not for a particular program. We're not asking program description, project budgets, anything like that. This is an operations grant. So it is a little bit different than what you've seen in program or project grant applications. Any other questions? Okay. I don't see any. Okay, so I'll say thank you to my colleagues for bringing your amazing expertise. Janie and Jordan, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you around town this spring, or at virtual office hours, or other things that are coming up. And we look forward to working with you on the application process. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.